A very good morning to you. It's Thursday, May 12, 2022. I'm Andy Johnson. Welcome to the program and welcome to us here at WESN on WESN CC as well. This is how we're going to begin the program. We'll tell you what's coming down for the next hour and a half on AM Prime this morning. In the second hour, we'll be talking with the Mayor of Point Fortin, Mayor Salima Thomas. How are they dealing in that borough, the most southern borough in the country, with the death of this baby who walked into a river, and the controversy that has arisen around that? The stories in the papers this morning say that a lot of people are in mourning, and the lady who was being chastised for having seen the baby walking and in their view did nothing about it, she's moved out of the area, given the assaults she's had in front of her house in the last couple of days. We'll talk with the mayor about that, how they're dealing with that. Also, we'll be talking with a journalist in St. Kitts Nevis. Andre Huey is his name. He's helping us understand another collapse in the government of St. Kitts Nevis, in the Twin Island state there. The Prime Minister asked the Governor General to dismiss a number of cabinet ministers, including one who was also the Premier of Nevis. And he, Mark Brantley, was on radio last night. He has a program on radio in Nevis, the Voice of Nevis, VON, which he was laying out what transpired and how the Prime Minister was sort of reneging his view on the question of unity and a fair share for the people of Nevis. So much more on that. We will talk with Mr. Huey in the second part, as the second interviewee on the program this morning. Of course, we'll give you the numbers for COVID-19. We'll tell you what the Newsday question, the poll, and the answers are. But right now, we're talking with Mr. Rodney Piggott. He's a member of the Tobago Civil Net organization, but he's speaking in his personal capacity about what the situation is among people in Tobago, the fact that they voted for a party led by a man named Watson Duke, who is now pitching tent in Trinidad and wants to upset the apple cart, so to speak, in certain critical constituencies in the country. Is that what the people in Tobago voted for when they voted 14-1 for Mr. Duke's PDP, the Progressive Democratic Alliance, the party to Patriots, the PDP, to take over the affairs of the Tobago House of Assembly? Is that what they voted for their leader to be in Trinidad trying to pitch tent in some critical constituencies? Mr. Piggott, good morning.
Good morning, Andy, and I certainly hope you hear me very well.
Very well.
I'm not a professional with these virtual settings, so I'm trying my best here with that. Andy, when we spoke on yesterday, you had posed that question to me, particularly concerning Mr. Watson Duke's move into the Trinidad space. And I remember saying distinctly that is not something that has gotten to the point where, it really can be commented on at this time, because it is a new move. It's something that was just done, and one cannot really see what is really taking place there and be able to comment on it successfully. I think I referred to it as the other shoe needing to fall. The people of Tobago right now, from what I'm hearing on the ground, has not really concerned themselves really with that particular move. And it's precisely for that reason. It's a fresh move and the other shoe hasn't fallen. So no one really sees where it's going to actively comment on it. What is of great concern to people on the ground, and this is in both Trinidad and Tobago, and this is the reason why I agreed to come on this morning, was the crime situation that has arisen to a point where, if you were God sitting up there in heaven somewhere, you would smell it. The stench is really, really high right now. And it is something that persons cannot simply put their head in the sand and ignore as if it's just happening to those people over there and it's not happening to me over here. And so that is what I really want to speak on this morning. The Watson Duke issue to me is not an issue right now that is really worthy of commenting right now, in terms of there's no meat and potatoes there other than persons may have their speculation. I'm not here to just simply speculate. So I would really like to get into that personal issue, because to me, that is the most important issue right now. And everything else is part of that symptom, because the crime is a symptom that has taken place. And I think as a nation, everyone needs to turn in that direction and say what is going on is unacceptable, but not just unacceptable. It cannot continue to go on at the level it is going on, in the direction that it's going, because if it does, we will wake up in a country that is a police state. You will have people on the street just going back to the days of the Old West, pulling guns and shooting. Merchants will begin arming themselves, and household people will start arming themselves, and you'll just have total chaos that is currently happening.
So your sense is that is at the front of people's minds in Tobago more than anything else at the moment?
That's at the front of people's mind in the nation of Trinidad and Tobago. And while the level of crime in Trinidad has not escalated here in Tobago, it is often said, when I came back home in 2016, I heard the saying that when America sneezes, Trinidad and Tobago catches a cold. We must now in Tobago ask ourselves, what does Tobago catch when Trinidad is coughing up rivers of blood? And rivers of blood is flowing in Trinidad right now. We cannot just simply turn aside and say to ourselves, this is something arbitrary, that a man will take a cutlass and chop up a woman, but not just a woman, but a 12-year-old boy. A 12-year-old boy. What has to be taking place there that will cause anyone to do that? Okay, you could say crimes of passion, she was cheating on him, she wouldn't accept him, blah, 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 and so forth and so forth. That is old story that no longer washes. But to take a cutlass and chop up a 12-year-old boy, mothers and stepfather trying to get their 13-year-old daughter to engage in a sexual act with them. I mean, something has to be going on, and other than just, these are just crimes happening in pockets. And what we're hearing is that there's chaos right now, and we need to address that.
What do you mean chaos?
There's chaos, and let's look at it this way. What I see taking place is, and this is, again, is not just Trinidad and Tobago. Crimes across the Caribbean is the highest in the world, right? So other nations that have much more population than the Caribbean is explosive in terms of crime. What has not taken place in the world is a reckoning of the outright murders, savagery that has taken place against the African people on this planet. There has been no reconciliation for that. And so the African people on the planet are off of their cultural access. African people, particularly in the diaspora, are not in their cultural space. They're not practicing their culture. And those on the continent, though they are still steeped in their culture, they have been harmed by the European insurgents in that they have not righted themselves in their space. They're still dominated by the Europeans, and now they're being dominated by other insurgents in their space. So they have not righted themselves. When we look at the Congo, we know of the over 6 million murdered in the Congo by King Leopold, and so Belgium bears the brunt there. The European nations bear the brunt there because these murders took place, and there has not been any reconciliation for that. What has happened in Haiti There has been no reconciliation for that. France still owes Haiti over $21 billion. The African in the diaspora never got back on their cultural square. Someone took a whip and whipped your name out of your consciousness. So you no longer call yourself Kunta Kinte, which means a king awakening or the awakening king. They now named you Toby. That has absolutely no meaning to you.
Or Pigot.
And so,
Or Pigot.
And yes, sir. Go ahead, please.
Yeah. So okay, but how do you make the link between what is happening, what has happened historically in these places, and what is taking place now? So you're saying that is you're suggesting that is somehow
very good. Yes, I'm about to tie that together. What you have is a snowball rolling downhill. This type of kilter that the world has been on has been rolling downhill for hundreds of years, and it has not been checked. What we're seeing happening in the world is the symptoms of the world being out of order. The world is currently being led by a people who lack the spirituality to lead the world in a right direction. This is a people that focuses on objectives. Everything is objectified. So money has become the god that is leading the world, and the people who more or less are leading money or in charge of money are the people who are leading the world in all of the affairs. What is happening is after the COVID, with the severe social isolation, has exacerbated what has been coming on the world for quite some time now. And so you're seeing a reflection, you're seeing the symptoms of a lot of domestic crimes taking place, a lot of crimes of opportunity taking place that simply does not make any sense to the mind, and that is because the world is out of order. Here in Trinidad and Tobago, we have put in place a governance structure that mirrors the governance structure of that people that has caused the world to go in this direction. They're the people leading the world in this direction.
But from what you're saying,
well,
from what you're saying is that is the case in many countries across the world. You're talking about the countries, what is called the post-colonial world, and even in the countries from which you say the people who've done that to other people.
Absolutely.
In a lot of cases, there is all kinds of turbulence taking place in those parts of the world as well.
Absolutely. Now, in those parts of the world, you're not hearing of it in the manner in which you hear of it in the smaller countries, but it is taking place on a large scale. In the United States, you hear of a lot of shootings, just people going into churches and into populated places and just opening fire. So you're hearing a lot of that. I was just speaking with a friend of mine in the United States, and she was telling me that her brother, who never seemed to have a problem, have a beautiful family, 3 beautiful children, beautiful wife, excellent job, making good money, living in what they consider to be a good neighborhood, who just committed suicide. And she has heard of several people in the United States who have just recently committed suicide, normal seeming people. So the exacerbation was caused by the COVID isolation. And what we're seeing coming out is the destabilization of societies. And that is primarily, and I want to point this out, it is primarily because the African people on the planet, who were the first to this planet, are off of their square. So when the African people are out of order, that now puts the entire world out of order, because the African people orient the world.
So what you're saying
we are not where we're supposed to be.
So crime in Trinidad and Tobago and in other parts of the world where you have African-oriented people, what you're saying is that it is as a result of us being put out of kilter over these centuries?
and we never restabilized ourselves. One of the first things we should have done when we were able to see the forest for the trees is to get rid of the brands that they placed on us.
What do you mean?
And that's the reason I told you about Kunta Kinte, and your name now is Toby. Kunta Kinte had a meaning to us. So when someone called me Kunta Kinte, they were saying to me, the awakening king, or king awakened. So they were calling me a name that had a meaning to my very ancestral cellular memory. You understand? And now that they're calling me Toby, and I'm calling myself Toby, that has absolutely no meaning, that has now caused within me a shift that I cannot get back on my square because I'm still branded. And in our country, we never got rid of the brands that they placed on us.
So let me ask you this. How is the personality of somebody named Farley Augustine or even Watson-Ju, how is that affected by what their names are now as opposed to what it should have been?
All right. So keep in mind that what we're talking about is the collective consciousness of a people. You see, what we have done is we have tend to personalize crime and the symptoms of crime. We make it as if it's just happening to those people. It's happening to a people, a collection of people. It's happening to the world. It's a global pandemic that is actually taking place.
What precisely?
That we need to address.
What precisely? So it's not confined to people who have been dispossessed and treated in the way that you described over these centuries. There's hardly a country where there's some kind of level of crime taking place, and you know, disruption of one kind or another. So, but how would you say that? So what are you saying is that how we have to fix this for ourselves? Can we? And what do we do?
Yes, it can be fixed. And one of the ways in which it must be fixed is that the African people, particularly in the diaspora, must get back on their cultural square. We must once again look to our culture. Let's say, for instance, in Trinidad and Tobago, we have a government that practices, and I was going in this direction, that practices a governance structure that is not us. It is not African and it is not Indian. And Indians and Africans are the two forces in Trinidad and Tobago. The party politics that has been put in place has divided those two down the middle, whereas they cannot find themselves working together. So in the high places, in our government structure, we're seeing what we call a lot of domestic disputes. So within that cadre of our government, while we have the opposition, they are functioning as the enemy of the government. And we can see the bacchanal going on between those two forces on a daily basis. That is domestic violence. Into our environment.
So how is it different in Tobago, where you have, both parties are essential. Well, Tobago people are who they are. You don't have that kind of ethnic divide in the politics in Tobago, but yet you have disputes and disagreements among different groups, not so?
And the different groups that you have disputes among is the same as in Trinidad. So in Tobago, you may have PDP and PNM primarily, and they are practicing party politics the way PNM and UNC is practicing in Trinidad. So Tobago is still in a more safe haven position. But as I stated before, when America sneezes, TNT catches a cold, what will Tobago catch when Trinidad is coughing up blood?
Well, somebody said that. We don't know that is true. Somebody may have said that, but you accept that is the case. So when the United States sneezes, we would have a cold. You believe that happens? You believe that is the case? And that's
well, I mean, whether I believe it or not, it is something that I met in this space when I came. I mean, I heard it from so many prominent people in this space, that what they're saying is that we are following the trend of what has taken place in America. For instance, we are now about to unleash what's called a war on crime. I heard it said in this space. We're now talking about war on crime.
We've been talking about that for decades. We've been using that term for decades.
right? So we'll be talking about war on drugs.
Yes,
we'll be
precisely.
talking about war, and all of those are simply war on people. So the war on crime, the war on drugs are simply war on people. All that does is fill the jail cells. That's all that does.
All right. So what you're saying, your solution is what?
The solution in this space, particularly Trinidad and Tobago, is that the people that still have the culture intact, the spirituality intact, need to be brought to the forefront, and Trinidad and Tobago ought to become a country that practices a governance structure that is more representative of the people, the groups of people, the cultures of people, and not practiced through political parties or party politics, which has simply divided the country.
You have to have some kind of affiliation, and perhaps the people who you're talking about should assume the leadership positions, do some things to take it. But I'm afraid we have to leave it there, Mr. Piggott.
All right. Thank you very much, Andy, and you have a great day.
You're very welcome.
Right.
Rodney Piggott, a member of the Tobago Civil Net Organization. Well, you heard his platform this morning. Thank you very much. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we share with you the COVID numbers, where they are, and the Newsday poll, the question and the responses as we go forward here on this edition of AM Prime. Stay with us.
Change your fate. Start to win at life with $20,000 every month. Win $20,000 every month for 20 years with NLCB's newest game, Win for Life. 6 numbers from 28 plus the cash ball could make you win for life. You deserve a win. Play Win for Life today. Visit NLCBGames.com for details. Players must be 18 years and over. Please play responsibly.
North Coast Jazz 2022. Day 2, Event 2. The big day is Family Saturday. And the biggest stars are performing on festival grounds. Michelle Sylvester, Ruel Lynch, Patrick Gordon, Adam Hagley featuring Tony Paul, Leandra Head, Johan Chuckery, Sharon Phillips, Freetown Collective, powered by festival band Dean Williams and Company. Each master talent will perform a song from Lord Nelson's wide catalogue. Saturday, Family, May 28th. Together again. Festival grounds, Blanchisseurs. Family, a tribute to Lord Nelson. North Coast Jazz and Heritage Festival 2022. 3 days, 3 events, 3 experiences. Born here, played here.
Get your tickets now at Crosby St. James, Extra Foods Arima, Sangre Grande, Grand Bazaar, Endeavour and Chaguanas, Digicel Trend City and C3 Malls, and Digicel Head Office, 11C Maraval, WESN 38 Gattaca Street, Woodbrook, Suntix.com, or call our ticket hotline at 628-5835 or 681-1516.
Tune in to WESN Content Capital from May 5th to 13th as we bring you exclusive coverage of the TTCB's T20 Festival. 8 teams will face off at the Cricket Centre in Balmain, Couva. Follow us for the live action only on WESN Content Capital, your home for cricket.
What's the best way to grab the attention of viewers?
Please exercise more patience. You have to be kidding me.
Doing what we do best.
I'll say at the very least it's a conspiracy of laziness against the people.
Join me, Keaton Shaw.
And me, Sean Michael Small, for Talking Point.
Weekdays from 8 a.m. to 9:30 a.m.
We go in-depth on the trending issues and engage the most controversial newsmakers
as we get them to account to the people for their actions.
You can't go to the government with nothing. You can't go to cabinet with an empty hand, with a wish.
I'm glad that we're having this a sober, mature discussion.
In the present situation, I expect a continuation of the chaos.
Join us for the discussion, Mondays to Fridays,
only on WESN,
the Content Capital.
Welcome back to the program. So let's get to the numbers. The new positive cases, the recovered patients, total active cases, persons in hospital. That's the update for today with COVID-19 in our midst. Let's begin to look at them. The number is 584. That's the new positive cases reported in the 24 hours up to the end of the day yesterday. The deaths over the last 24 hours, 2 people succumbed to the virus. The total active positive cases now, 8,873. And the death toll to this point, 3,863. 183, that's the number of persons in the parallel healthcare system dealing with COVID-19 in our midst. So those are the numbers on this morning, the 12th of May, 2022. Let's get to the Newsday question and the responses. So the poll, what would be the most effective way to get 12,000 illegal guns off the street? And I'll tell you what some of the responses are. One person is saying, give back the job of Commissioner of Police to Gary Griffith. Another response is, tell Jacobs, Hines, and Rowley to figure it out. They are the ones collecting the huge salaries and perks. Another question is, step 1, stop the illegal importation of drugs. Step 2, remove the big boys who oversee the drug trade and reward of government contracts. And step 3, clean up the police service. The rest will fall in place. And the other response is, offer incentives and protection to persons who come out and speak. Well, right now with us, let me just read a story that was carried in the Express yesterday about this situation. The headline was, Parliament dissolved as Harris fires government ministers. It's dated Bastia, that's the capital of St. Kitts and Nevis. It's in St. Kitts. St. Kitts and Nevis Prime Minister Dr. Timothy Harris yesterday said he had asked the Governor General Samuel Seaton to dissolve the Parliament with immediate effect after announcing the dismissal of several ministers, including his deputy, Sean Richards, and the Nevis Premier, Mark Brantley. In a radio and television broadcast, Prime Minister Harris, who was due to have faced a motion of no confidence that had been submitted by 6 members of the coalition, the National Unity Government, said he would soon announce the date for general elections. He wanted to talk about the fact that he has confidence in the people of St. Kitts and Nevis, and he strongly believes in their right to choose their representatives in free and fair elections. Well, this is not the first time that there's been tumult and turmoil in the government in St. Kitts and Nevis, and sometimes it happens because of disagreements about arrangements made, and the arrangements made there. So last night, the Premier of Nevis, who was the Minister of Foreign Affairs in the federal government of St. Kitts Nevis, he was on the radio station called The Voice of Nevis, VON, for 2 hours, and he was outlaying the case as to what transpired. What he said, part of what he said was that there was an attempt by 6 of the 9 MPs that make up the governing coalition to get a motion of no confidence against the Prime Minister because they considered that he had broken the agreements that they had when they formed the government. And to forestall that, the Prime Minister went to the Governor General and asked for those ministers to have their appointments revoked. And he talked about where it came from. The Prime Minister wants to renege on an agreement that they had that no Prime Minister will serve more than 2 terms, and other matters referring to that. Well, to help us understand that a little more now, we're talking with a journalist, Mr. Andre Huey. He's associated with a news organization called SKN Newsline. Mr. Huey is with us. Good morning. Good to have you, sir. Thanks for agreeing to talk with us on this. We're not here. I think you have to unmute your mic because, yeah.
Yes. Hi. Sorry. Good morning. Thanks. Thank you for having me.
Very good. So take it up from where I left off. Mr. Brantley, and you probably could explain the system of the federal government in St. Kitts Nevis, such that the Premier of Nevis is a member of the cabinet of St. Kitts and Nevis. Before him, it was a man who died recently, Vance Amory. So he's the Premier of Nevis, but in the federal arrangement, he's the Minister of Foreign Affairs. And he talked a lot about how, in his view, the Prime Minister was undercutting the work that he was doing as well as other ministers, and that the government, led by the Prime Minister, who had his own problems with the former Prime Minister, we can talk about that to the extent that it is necessary, was not keeping faith with the agreement about Nevis getting its fair share of the arrangements, and that the Prime Minister was seeking to override the agreement that they had come to in the team unity lead up to the election, that they accepted in faith that no Prime Minister was going to serve more than 2 terms because they didn't want to have a repeat of the former Prime Minister, Dr. Dennis Douglas, and so on. Take it up from there.
Yeah, well, basically, just for your viewers to understand, St. Kitts and Nevis has a National Assembly, a Parliament, or National Assembly as it's called in the Constitution, of 11 seats. 3 of those seats come from Nevis, 8 are on St. Kitts. So you could have a situation, which is what you had before the dissolution of Parliament, where a member in the Nevis government, because the Nevis Island also has an island administration, a local government. You could have members serving in both the federal parliament and also in the Nevis government. And that's the case we have here. What also happened too is that you had a government that was a coalition government formed in 2014 to contest the 2015 elections. Well, 2013 thereabouts, to contest the 2015 elections that comprised of three parties. The People's Labour Party, which is the smallest party of the coalition, which is headed by the Prime Minister. The People's Action Movement, which is one of the older parties and the larger party in the coalition, they have 4 seats. And the Concerned Citizens Movement, which is the party from Nevis, which is headed by the Premier, Mark Brantley. So these three parties formed a coalition to contest the elections of 2015 to unseat the then Prime Minister, Dr. Denzil Douglas, who was the Prime Minister for 20 years at that point. Now, before they entered into the election, they signed an agreement known as the Charlestown Accord. Now, this accord was signed on Charlestown Nevis, which is why it was called the Charlestown Accord.
Right.
Amongst the three parties. And in that agreement, which some of which you've alluded to, it was agreed that no Prime Minister would serve more than 2 terms, and that Nevis would get an equitable share of monies from the federal government, primarily from one of the major income earners for the country, the Citizenship and Investment Program. Now, for those persons who don't know what the CBI is, it's basically a program where persons from other countries, foreign nationals, very wealthy people who need a second passport can actually invest in St. Kitts and Nevis and in return get a passport of St. Kitts and Nevis, which allows them visa-free access to several countries, which maybe their passport, their native passport, would not allow them access. So you have people from the Middle East, from China and these other countries where they may have difficulty getting across in places like Europe and other parts of the world. With a St. Kitts and Nevis passport, they won't have that difficulty. So it's a very lucrative program. It's a program that's been utilized by several countries in the Eastern Caribbean. St. Kitts and Nevis being the oldest, they were the first to introduce the program in 1984. So it's a very lucrative program. And for several years, Nevis has complained that Mark Brantley in particular and his party have complained that Nevis has not been getting its fair share. So essentially, in this agreement, they agreed that Nevis would get an equitable share of receipts from the CBI to the island. And as you indicated, according to Mr. Brantley, that has not been the case. And in fact, he actually gave some figures about a month ago. He managed to ferret, as he said, he put together a team to ferret out the figures because he was not getting that information from the Ministry of Finance. And he managed to get some figures as to how much the program actually earned since 2007 to 2021. And his calculation is that Nevis got about, if my memory serves me correctly, maybe 7 or 3% of the total amount of monies that the program made between 2007 and 2021. So in his view, and especially since 2015, in his view, he believes that the government has not lived up to its promise. The Prime Minister has not lived up to his promise to ensure that Nevis gets an equitable share of those monies. So those have been the crux of the disagreement amongst the coalition partners. I must also say this, though, that the accusation of the Prime Minister wanting a third term, because he has done 2 terms or 1.5, because we had elections in 2020. The accusation that the Prime Minister has reneged on that agreement has to be something that is happening behind the scenes, because publicly the Prime Minister has never said that he wants a third term. In fact, he has said on the contrary publicly that the next election, if the Team Unity were to win, that the leader of the People's Action Movement, who was the Deputy Prime Minister, Sean Richards, would become the next Prime Minister. But like I said, obviously, there are some things that are happening behind the scenes that the Prime Minister is not saying publicly.
Right, okay.
That is irritating his coalition members.
Right, but in that context, I think Mr. Brantley mentioned a lady from Trinidad. I understand her name is Ramratan, who is some kind of a political advisor, and he was talking about an occasion or moment in which she was laying out what he considered to be a sort of track for that to happen, and saying that, the Prime Minister is doing so well, people don't want to change him, and the rest of it. And he accused her of sort of laying the ground for that to happen so that people would want to support Mr. Harris for another term, which would go past the agreement that they have. And he also talked about how, in some ways, the Prime Minister, Dr. Harris, was seeming to undermine the work of his own ministers because he wanted to be in charge of everything and be seen to be at the forefront of everything, whether it's domestically or whether at international fora. And that was causing some problems among them.
Yes, that's true. And in fact, I was going to make that point as well, that I think that's where the confusion actually started. After the elections in 2020, the very first political convention of the People's Labour Party, the Prime Minister's Party, one of the keynote speaker, who you referred to there, Dr. Sharon and McNichol, she was actually a political advisor for Team Unity prior to them contesting the elections. And she's spoken on their platform, on the Prime Minister's platform.
Dr. Sharon Gopal McNichol?
Sharon McNichol, yes, that's right. Yes.
Okay, all right,
yes.
Good.
Yes, so she would have spoken before on this is not the first time she would have spoken on their platform. And she did speak at the convention, the very first convention after the elections in 2020, where she actually made a case publicly for the Prime Minister to deserve a third term, much to the applause of the gathering.
And that's petitions.
Right. Where I think the coalition partners were irritated and bothered by that statement was that the Prime Minister at that convention did not sort of backtrack or condemn the statements or anything. He didn't give an indication there.
Or disassociate himself from it.
Right. He didn't associate himself from it. So, and of course, the following week or maybe a couple of weeks later, I believe, the People's Action Movement had their convention. He spoke at that convention, and he also did not use that opportunity to disassociate himself from that statement. So people, the coalition partners and supporters of the other parties felt that that was a sign that he somewhat agreed with the statements from his keynote speaker. Suffice to say, again, he did not, and he was asked that question again before they had their convention this year. We actually asked him the question, are you seeking a third term? And he went back to the statement he made at the start of the government that he does not intend to seek a third term. But he has not come out outright to say, well, I'm not going to go seek a third term. So I think all these, this kind of sowed seeds of doubt amongst the coalition partners and supporters. And so the fact that he didn't come out and condemn the statements, people felt, okay, he probably is seeking a third term.
All right, I want to come to the point with the motion of no confidence in him, which was tabled, and the Speaker, Mr. Brantley, said last night that the Speaker sort of exercised what we call here some testicular fortitude, some cojones, in putting it on the agenda because there were fears that he may have been afraid to do it. But that is what the Prime Minister sought to forestall by going to the Governor General and asking for the removal of these ministers because they would have outnumbered him in the Parliament. And therefore, that should have spoken for itself. Let's talk a little bit. I want to come to that. But if you go back a little bit about some of the issues that Dr. Harris had with Dr. Douglas as to why they broke, well, he broke ranks and they broke off the arrangement.
Yeah. So if we go back to that and what started, so this is actually the second, probably motion of no confidence, second or third motion of no confidence we've had. That was tabled or rather filed in the last few years. So in the situation with Dr. Douglas, who was the Prime Minister in 2014, or well, 2013 actually, when the motion was first filed, there was a disagreement in that arrangement, in that government, primarily between Dr. Harris, who was a part of the Labour Party administration at the time, was a senior minister actually in that government, and Dr. Douglas. Essentially, there were matters pertaining to there were several things that the opposition at the time raised, but one of the key things that I think was the straw that broke the camel's back was a land for debt swap, land for debt arrangement, where one of the requirements that St. Kitts and Nevis had at the time, having an IMF arrangement, was to sell lands that were mortgaged to one of the major indigenous commercial banks here in St. Kitts and Nevis, the St. Kitts and Nevis Anguilla National Bank. Now, there were people, the opposition was opposed to because they felt, well, we are selling our patrimony because of bad financial management of the government. And so Dr. Harris at the time opposed the land for debt swap in his own government. And so the Prime Minister the then Prime Minister, Dr. Douglas, felt, well, if you are part of this government, we have collective responsibility. You either are going to agree with what we're doing, or you have to leave our government. In effect, the Prime Minister then fired Dr. Harris from the government, and that kind of started the snow effect, so to speak, the snowball effect that led to the formation of Team Unity. So we fast forward now to 2022. Disagreement amongst the coalition government led to a motion of no confidence being filed. Obviously, Dr. Harris would not have had the numbers to win that motion. And so, yes, this action was seen as an attempt to have the motion not brought before Parliament. He also had a time limit. Now, this is a thing, this is very important to me, because Team Unity, when they came in government in 2015, in around maybe 2016 or 2017, they actually moved to pass amendments to the Motion of No Confidence Act, which now placed a time limit in which between when a motion is filed and when it is brought before Parliament. Now, the reason for this is that when the motion was filed back in 2013, thereabouts, the then government, or the Speaker of the House at that time, did not bring the matter to the National Assembly. So the motion was never debated, and it went on for more than 2 years. It was just lingering on, and several excuses were made as to why the motion was not brought before Parliament. And so to avoid that rehappening, or that reoccurring, the government of the time in 2017 decided, or 2019 actually, decided to introduce a time limit to the motion of no confidence. Now you fast forward from 2019 to 2022, that same time limit now has come back to sort of hurt Dr. Harris, because now he had to, or the Speaker had to ensure that either the motion was presented before Parliament within 21 days after it was filed, or Parliament had to be dissolved. Yeah. So that time limit certainly has made a big difference, because now we are in a situation where we are basically heading towards an election as a result of the time limit that was put in the motion.
Yeah, because he forestalled the debate on the motion of no confidence by going to the Governor General and asking for the removal of...
That's correct.
And the Governor General had said that, Mr. Brantley was saying last night that you'd had a counsel on this matter from Mr. Jeffrey Robertson, who said that, in fact, the Governor General had the power to do it. If you have a majority of people in the Parliament saying, well, we have no confidence in the leader, and that he had enough power to act, but that for whatever reason he didn't. But that the Speaker...
There's a difference of interpretation, because that's one interpretation, and that's generally what most people thought would have been the outcome. However, there's also another interpretation from other legal experts that suggests that that provision for the Governor General to remove the Prime Minister, or remove support from the Prime Minister if majority support from the elected members say, well, we no longer have confidence in him, that provision was only applicable for a certain time limit, which is shortly after an election, or shortly after the government would have changed. Obviously, it's almost 2 years since the last election. So those legal experts are saying, well, that time has already elapsed. So the Governor General's hands are tied in that regard. So it's a matter of interpretation. I guess it's basically how you would look at that clause in the Constitution and determine whether or not the Governor General could do that. But yes, I think a lot of people believed that could have happened. But again, many people are saying, no, you should have just gone ahead and filed the motion, because it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, so what was the situation on the streets, both in Bastia and in Charlestown? One imagines that there's a difference of opinion, Kitishans thinking one way, Nevishans thinking another. So the country is split again politically.
Well, it really depends on who you talk to. I think generally... there are some people who are really looking forward to an election. The opposition, St. Kitts Nevis Labour Party, for example, they believe that if an election is called, that they will have the opportunity to win this time around and do much better than they did in 2020. So they are certainly looking forward to an election. There are probably factions within supporters of the government who probably do not want an election, because they probably feel they probably are not strong to go into an election to win it. I must make the point as well that one of the things that probably could change the status quo is that in St. Kitts and Nevis, unlike some of the Caribbean countries, definitely unlike Trinidad, we have voters that are living abroad, persons who are St. Kitts and Nevis nationals who reside abroad but are eligible to vote.
So you have overseas voting?
Overseas voting, right. So basically what can happen, and what usually happens around election time, is that both sides would charter planes and fly in plane loads of voters from all over, from the USA mostly, and other parts of the Caribbean where conditions and divisions who are on the voters list reside. And these voters can swing an election quite easily, especially in constituencies where margins are very small. Marginal victories are very small. Overseas voters can change that. And so the last election in 2020, that did not happen for the first time because of the COVID-19 restrictions. The borders were closed, airport, no one was allowed in, or, movement was restricted. So as a result of that, we saw a very different result to what, most people would normally expect. It is also believed that if you speak to people like Peter Wickham, who does a lot of polling here in St. Kitts Nevis,
the Bajan poster,
he would actually tell you that the Labour Party is very strong with overseas voters. So the fact that they did not have those overseas voters the last election, it made it difficult for them to win. This time around, however, that's different. The borders are open, and so it is expected that overseas voters are going to come in. And if that happens, then that puts the Labour Party in a very strong position. So if you speak to their supporters, they are looking forward to an election. But I think generally, there are mixed reactions. People are, quite tense and on the edge, so to speak. Everybody's looking to see what's going to happen next. Yeah. Obviously, this latest move by the Prime Minister sort of gives a little breathing room, a little more time, but the parties are gearing themselves up for elections.
All right, Mr. Hugh, thank you very much for talking with us, and we continue to follow this because so we are from the point of view of being a twin island state, we are a republic. You all are still under that system, right? So there's reason to watch that for those reasons. I can tell you that from where we sit now, Mr. Brantley is likely to be on this program tomorrow, so we continue to watch it. But thank you very much, and we'll keep in touch with you on it.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andrew Huey of SKN News Service in St. Kitts Nevis, on that situation developing there. Once again, political turmoil in that Twin Island state in CARICOM. Well, we're moving to our first feature now in the look around the region. In a kind of similar situation, there is what is reported here from Guyana News Source. Vice President Jagdeo and opposition leader Norton got into a face-to-face argument at an EU reception to mark Europe Day. Let's take a look at that.
It was the first encounter between the two since Norton was elected as opposition leader. The two have been trading barbs at each other for weeks at their separate press conferences. On the sidelines of the reception last evening, the two started a discussion about the 2020 elections, the statements of poll, corruption, and allegations of fraud. Though the exchange was civil, the opposition leader threw out the challenge to have a public debate with the vice president on major issues. The vice president said he would like to see the APNU-AFC present copies of its statements of poll from the last elections first. He dismissed Mr. Norton's call for a public debate as nothing more than a gaffe.
Hear what you say. You are being on the 60. You are being on the 60. On the 60. To have one, I will come two, an assessment sheet, and then the observation report for the assess to determine which votes were for and which one. No, never allowed it to go. There is a law called the Representation of People Act, and it speaks specifically what are the committees about. You voted along. You voted along. Make a point. You sat down and signed to a recount, and this recount, you sat down and signed this recount. This recount is put into law. This recount is put into law. Yeah, it had 4 fields.
Mr. Jagdeo said if Mr. Norton is serious about wanting to engage him in a public debate, that he should provide the statements of poll that the APNU-AFC claims show that it won the elections. Since taking office, President Irfan, who is currently out of the country, has not met with the opposition. Just over 2 weeks ago, he indicated that he would soon be extending an invitation to the opposition leader to begin consultations on a number of constitutional matters and appointments that require the involvement of the opposition leader. Mr. Norton believes the meeting should be more broad-based and should also cover other issues.
What do you make of it? Interesting exchanges there between the vice president, who was the former president, Mr. Jagdev, and Mr. Aubrey Norton, leader of the opposition in Guyana. If you know the Guyana language, when somebody says that is a gaffe, what it means is that is old talk, nothing to it but that. Well, we will take a break for the news and other things. And when we come back, we talk with the mayor of Point Fortin, Salima Thomas, on what is the state of affairs, and what's the temperature there among people in Point Fortin, given this tragedy of the 2-year-old boy walking into the river and the repercussions from that of the lady who saw him in the street straying and said that she didn't have a chance to go after him. When she did, she lost sight of him. And now she has moved out of her home because of threats, as it were, by people who went to her to vent their spleens about the fact that she didn't do what they felt that she should have done to avoid what happened. Stay with us.
Seven is out. All day is in. WESN News on the hour.
North Coast Jazz 2022. You asked for it. Consider it done. Park in comfort at the Queen's Park Savannah and ride in style to festival grounds for the biggest family event. North Coast Jazz and Heritage Festival. Park, ride, enjoy. It's all about family. Family Saturday, May 28th. Together again. Festival grounds, Blanchishers. Family. A tribute to Lord Nelson. North Coast Jazz and Heritage Festival. Born here, played here.
Tickets available at Crosby, St. James, Extra Foods Arima, Grand Bazaar, Endeavour and Chaguanas, Extra Foods Sagre Grande, Digicel, Twin City and Gulf City Malls, WESN, 38 Gattaca Street, Woodbrook, Suntix.com, or call our ticket hotline at 628-5835 or 681-1516.
AM Prime on WESN, the only place from 6 to 7:30 a.m. where you can get the most analytical and thorough interviews and regional reports.
The Barbados Labour Party, led by the Prime Minister Mia Amor-Motley, once again able to achieve a clean sweep in yesterday's general election.
I think a lot of people have underestimated the power of Tobago nationalism.
If the government is afraid to say it, I, Martin George, I am saying it this morning on your show, Andy, there will be no carnival before Ash Wednesday.
Grab a cup of coffee and start your day right watching AM Prime with Andy Johnson weekdays from 6 a.m. only on your content capital, WESN.
Let your voice be heard. Call Madam Fix It on WESN, the only place that effectively helps you with your woes. Having problems getting onto government agencies, water woes, NIS and pension problems, potholes, and much, much more. Call me, Madam Fix It, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, right here on WESN. Let me fix it for you.
Burning questions, urgent topics. Welcome back to One on One, the show where we tackle the most current and pertinent subjects that are affecting all citizens, where we ask the hard questions and have in-depth conversations. What separates One on One from other talk shows is that the conversation stems from a younger perspective on topics that affect the fabric of our society. One on One, Wednesdays at 10 a.m. on WESN Content Capital.
Every day, we communicate through stories. Stories of ourselves, our challenges, our goals, our experiences, and our aspirations. Storytelling is an art that we have mastered. WESN Film Studios comprises a collaborative team of experts with extensive industry experience locally, regionally, and internationally. The ability of your business to successfully communicate with your preferred audience depends on the strength of the stories you tell. Your vision should be communicated in a high-quality, professional, and creative way. concept to post-production, advertising to film, multi-camera productions, live events, streaming, and virtual conferencing. We are WESN Film Studio. Let your own unique voice be heard and your vision realized. Call us today at 628-5835 for your next production.
We have been apart for a long time. Now let's get together once again. Let's welcome you back. Family. North Coast Jazz 2022, May 27th to 29th. Born here, played here.
In this season, we talk more about health, wellness, and everything in between. I am so excited to share with you everything about health and wellness so that you can design the life that you've always dreamed of. Join me here on What's Up Doc.
What's Up Doc? Tuesdays and Thursdays here on WESN, Content Capital.
Don't keep yourself handcuffed. We continue to receive calls from members of the viewing public whose cable provider is Flow and cannot receive WESN. We advise that you unfortunately reside on the original Flow platform. If you wish to receive WESN's high-quality programming, you must contact Flow to be upgraded to the new Flow Evo platform. Call Flow now and demand your upgrade.
A reminder from WESN. We urge you to protect yourself and others from the spread of COVID-19. Stay safe by taking some simple precautions. Clean your hands often. Use soap and water or an alcohol-based hand rub. Maintain a safe distance from anyone who is coughing or sneezing. Wear a mask. Don't touch your eyes, nose or mouth. Cover your nose and mouth with your bent elbow or a tissue when you cough or sneeze. Stay at home. If you have a fever, cough and difficulty breathing, seek medical attention. Following the above can help us all to help each other.
Well, welcome back to the program. We're seeking to make contact with the Mayor of Point Fortin, Salima Thomas. She'd agreed to talk with us on what's the state of affairs in the borough. How are people dealing with the aftermath of this tragedy that's happened? A 2-year-old boy who walked into a river. We can tell you that there's a story in the Newsday this morning. A Point Fortin woman who saw Kimani walking moves out of the area, and you would have seen footage on the news last evening about people confronting the lady, sort of accusing her of allowing the boy to die and that she didn't do what she should have done. There's a story says that Zoe Kwan Kep, that's her name, the woman who reported seeing the now dead infant Kimani Francis roaming alone on a road in Tishe Village, Point Fortin on Monday, has moved out of the area. Police were called in after outraged residents gathered at her home in 10th Street Extension on Tuesday after finding the child's body in a river. Residents hurled obscenities and threw stones and other objects at the house, accusing her of failing to save the child. On Tuesday night, while police dispersed the residents, she began packing items to go elsewhere as a temporary safety measure. The woman, in a social media video, said her house was not close to the road. She said she tried, while speaking to the police on the phone, to follow the barefoot toddler who was wearing only disposable diapers. She lives a short distance away from where Kimani lived with his mother, Kimberly Charles, 22, and extended relatives. And there's a picture of her with a police officer taken somewhere yesterday by photographer Ayana Kinsale. And we could show you as well the front page of the Newsday today. That's the story. 3 women killed in 3 days in different parts of Trinidad and Tobago. So those stories and more in today's edition of the Newsday. But while we wait to see to what extent we can make contact with Mayor Thomas. We secure around the region again, and this time we go to St. Lucia, where during the lockdown, if you go to St. Lucia at all, there is this Friday night activity that you don't want to miss. It's in a village called Grosile, and lots of people gather for a street festival every Friday night, and it's returned to what it used to be. Let's take that story from NBC Prime in St. Lucia.
Home Affairs Minister Dr. Virginia Albert Poyot on May 3, 2022 announced that government will no longer renew passports except in cases of emergency. The announcement came as a surprise to thousands of nationals whose passports have expired. Minister Poyot explained that government is working on introducing electronic passports and as such wants to phase out the current stock of the national document.
We want to ration the number of passports we have so that we do not print too many of the old passports at this time. Some people tell you because their passport expires, they just want it renewed, not that they have any intention of traveling in a hurry. So those who have intentions to travel, we deal with them and we give them priority at this time.
But the National Consumers Association has taken issue with the manner in which the decision was communicated to the public. Representative Vina Frederick says the public has not been given a clear idea of what circumstances would constitute as an emergency for the Immigration Department beyond medical reasons. Ms. Frederick notes that people travel for a multiplicity of reasons, including business and leisure. Moreover, passports are used as a national form of identification. In fact, the transaction of any official business, particularly banking, requires two forms of ID. A large section of the St. Lucian population who are not holders of a driver's license depend on a valid passport along with their national ID card to undertake transactions. The Home Affairs Minister has not indicated what arrangements, if any, have been put in place to address this situation.
We have not heard about the new features or the new changes. We have not heard about the benefits, whether there will be any additional cost involved, and how that will impact consumers. I just think the way in which consumers have been communicated with on any change that will impact them is very poor. The government has the GIS at its disposal and communication officers and assistants who are based all over the various government ministries. Yet we are not seeing any improvement in how people are communicated with. Ministries are service sector, and we have to do better. I am calling on the government and the agencies responsible to do better by the public.
The NCA representative is also urging the government to refine its business continuity plan to ensure that the services provided to the public are not severely disrupted. The Immigration Department was closed for some 2 weeks due to mold and air quality issues at the Lamar building.
All right, so that was one St. Lucia story. We want to take you now to that story about the reopening of the place, the famous place is called Grosile. But while we do that, we want to invite you that while we wait to see if we can in fact make contact with Mayor Thomas or get her to accept the Zoom or answer her phone, we want to invite you to call and talk with us about whatever it is that is on your mind, even if you're calling from, especially if you're calling from Point Fortin, and talk with us about what the situation is there, what the temperature is there. But in the meantime, let's take in that story about the return of action in this place called Grosile outside of the capital, Castries in St. Lucia.
In excess of 2 years after its cancellation as a precaution against the spread of COVID-19 infection, vendors, patrons of the event, and residents of the seaside community of Grosile took to the streets to attend the event, which was once a staple on St. Lucia's entertainment circuit. The weekly event was brought to a halt on March 13, 2020, at the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. The decision, taken as a mitigative measure, heralded a 2-year hiatus of the long-standing event held for decades. Examining the effect of its resumption, MP for Grosile, Kenson Casimir, described the level of event success as being determined by one's viewpoint.
Success when it comes to Grosile Friday night in this environment is a very fluid concept, simply because it's based on how you define it. If your definition is based on the amount of people who turn up, absolutely amazing. If your definition is based on vendors getting some form of economic activities, absolutely amazing. If your definition is on the actual people of Grosile, those ordinary persons who sell kerosene to the vendors, charcoal to the vendors, ice, because we have a number of households who actually supplement their income for doing that, then amazing. But of course, in this climate, you would have expected a little bit more in terms of, from different persons doing what they need to do to make it a safer place. But I think all in all, The ambition is to ensure that the world is moving in a direction where we start to live with COVID. And I think we understood that this is where we are as a people.
According to the Grosley MP, the event is back in the way it's supposed to be, with allowances granted for mass crowd events by local health authorities. The well-attended activity invited exclamations of concern by some over the swelling crowds and the potential effect on COVID-19 case figures. According to COVID-19 protocol issued by St. Lucia's Ministry of Health to span the period April 30th to June 3rd, 2022, quote, a person can host or attend a social event or recreational activity that consists of not more than 200 persons or his or her immediate family of fully vaccinated persons, end quote. According to health officials, any event with over 200 people must receive approval from NEMO and is not allowed to exceed 300 people. Exceeding this figure is expected to draw the involvement of police and enforcement of the permissible figure. Addressing safety concerns surrounding the event, the Grosley MP notes case spikes have been recorded throughout the period of suspension for the event.
I think we are about to witness a 5th wave and a 6th wave. And the 5 previous waves, there wasn't any Grosley Friday nights. Let's be honest. There was no Grosley Friday night during the Omicron. There was no Grosley Friday night during most of the other waves that we had. Yet still we saw an uptick. It just doesn't justify anybody not doing what they're supposed to do by way of getting vaccinated, following the protocols.
All right, well, we're still hoping that the Mayor of Point Fortin, Mayor Thomas, will pick up the phone or check into the Zoom as we made the arrangements to be talking with her about it this morning. But in the meantime, as we continue to run down what's taking place in the Caribbean, I'm going to tell you a story about, in Barbados this time, about they're saying that a wage hike may not be ideal as an option this time for workers there. But before we get to that, just I invite you to call us and talk with us. If you're calling from Point Fortin, as I said, we would appreciate that. 622-9338 and 623-9376. If not, on whatever it is on your mind that you want to share with us and have a discussion about. So those are the numbers to call. In the meantime, let's take in that story about discussions about a wage hike in Barbados.
This Friday, amid the rising cost of living, leading economists suggest a wage hike is not the best option at this time. Speaking on this month's Caribbean Economic Forum last evening, Central Bank Governor Cleviston Haynes said government could introduce temporary measures to assist the vulnerable.
We run the danger of trying to have wage increases that are adapting to inflation, which is or to price levels, which are a temporary cycle. And when these things change, you've already embedded those wage increases in, and therefore they're more difficult to reverse. So you need, I think, transfers perhaps that are time bound. So you may be doing it for a particular period of time, so as to be able to allow people to be able to adapt, but it is not a permanent feature of the government's expenditure or tax system.
Noted regional economist Marla Dukuran supports assistance for low-income citizens and pensioners, but she advises that any move towards a wage increase must go hand in hand with increased productivity.
In the absence of increases in productivity, wage increases that simply reflect inflation and which are completely delinked from performance will only serve to make whatever you are producing uncompetitive over time and drive you out of the market, which doesn't benefit anyone. We have to ensure that when we are negotiating for higher wages, we are also adding higher value.
All right, well, let's tell you about this story. We're talking about crime in different parts of the country. We're talking about that tragedy in Point Fortin. And this is the headline story on the Newsday this morning. A third woman killed in 3 days. This one, a 24-year-old Guayguari woman was shot to death. And you just heard Mr. Richie Sukai talking yesterday about the situation with the crime. Well, there are a lot of people who are talking about the need probably for some kind of a crime summit in the country, given what is happening. You just saw a video of gun-toting persons pulling a gun on somebody. We're talking about the situation in which bandits just brazenly walk into places. You saw a story a couple of weeks ago, smashing a store's showcase and taking jewels. And people are calling for some action. People are lamenting the fact that, well, business leaders in particular, and in some cases community stakeholders and community leaders, lamenting what they see as the absence of action and activity and even statements, positions on the matter from the people in government. And people are saying that, well, we're back to where we didn't want to be. Steve Alvarez wrote a letter to the editor some days ago, naming names and citing situations which he is saying that we are probably where we never were with crime in the country. How we pull back from that? There has to be some kind of a national reckoning. There has to be some kind of a pulling together by those people who are in charge of dealing with it. Let's just go through this story a little bit in the Newsday this morning. On page 3, the third woman killed in 3 days. One of them was the woman who was killed by another one because both of them had a dispute over a man. Both of them have been seeing. He has children with both of them, and he's in prison. And somehow they fought it out, and one was stabbed to death. So there's a story here with Krishana Mohammed, a 24-year-old mother of 3 who was savagely chopped to death by a 40-year-old man known to her at her Labre village Mayaro home on Wednesday. So there's a village in Mayaro called Labre, as not to be confused with the community of Labre, which is on the way to Point Fortin. She's the third woman to be murdered since Sunday. On Monday, Stephanie Calbio, 34, was fatally stabbed in Caranage during a fight with a 24-year-old woman, allegedly over a man who is in prison. On Tuesday, Abio Kajo, 31, was fatally stabbed and chopped at her home in Lachus Road, Pinal. Her son, Levi Lewis, who's 12, was stabbed in that incident and died while undergoing treatment at hospital. Police said Mohammed was at home when the man arrived around 10:55 a.m. The two had an argument. The man chopped Mohammed several times to her neck, almost severing it. She died on the scene. The man ran away but was stopped by police officers and allegedly confessed to killing Mohammed. He was arrested and handed over to the police at Mayaro Station. Police went to Mohammed's home where they found a 12-inch cutlass. When Newsday visited Mohammed's relative's home a short distance away, her mother, Alison, was distraught and found it difficult to speak. Mohammed's 23-year-old brother, Isaiah, related what he was told about her killing. Pointing to his neck, Isaiah said, quote, "He, the suspect, hit her one chop and that was it. She fell down flat on the ground and blood started to run out," unquote. Squatting beside his mother, who was sitting in a chair, Isaiah struggled to contain his emotions as he spoke about Mohammed's 3-month troubled relationship with the man. He said Mohammed kept her problems hidden for a long time. And he's quoted again, "Recently she came out like she can't take it again. She told us she's trying to end the relationship," unquote. Isaiah told Newsday he and other family members had been threatened in the past. He's quoted again, "I can't lose my mother. I can't lose anybody again," unquote. A female relative who declined to give her name claimed when Mohammed told them that she was being abused, it was reported to the police, but nothing happened. Isaiah said Mohammed's 3 children, 6 and 3 years old and 18 months, are traumatized. They're asking, "Where's mommy?" They were taken in a car by family friends to stay at another relative's home in the village. That's the story with the third woman who was killed in Trinidad and Tobago in 3 days. We take a break. When we come back, we invite your call, 622-9338 or 623-9376.
Jazz 2022. You asked for it. Consider it done. Park in comfort at the Queen's Park Savannah and ride in style to festival grounds for the biggest family event. North Coast Jazz and Heritage Festival. Park, ride, enjoy. It's all about family. Family Saturday, May 28th. Together again. Festival grounds, Blanchishers. Family. A tribute to Lord Nelson. North Coast Jazz and Heritage Festival. Born here, played here.
Get your tickets now at Crosby St. James, Extra Foods Arima, San Migranti, Grand Bazaar, Endeavour and Chaguanas, Digicel Twin City and C3 Malls, and Digicel Head Office, 11C Maraval, WESN, 38 Gattaca Street, Woodbrook, Suntix.com, or call our ticket hotline at 628-5835 or 681-1516.
Tune in to WESN Content Capital from May 5th to 13th as we bring you exclusive coverage of the TTCB's T20 Festival. 8 teams will face off at the Cricket Centre in Balmain, Couva. Follow us for the live action only on WESN Content Capital, your home for cricket.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through. Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
North Coast Jazz 2022. Day 2, Event 2. The big day is Family Saturday. And the biggest stars are performing on festival grounds. Michelle Sylvester, Ruel Lynch, Patrick Gordon, Adam Hagley featuring Tony Paul, Leandra Head, Johan Chuckery, Sharon Phillips, Freetown Collective, powered by festival band Dean Williams and Company. Each master talent will perform a song from Lord Nelson's wide catalogue. Saturday, Family, May 28th. Together again. Festival grounds, Blanchisseurs. Family, a tribute to Lord Nelson. North Coast Jazz and Heritage Festival 2022. 3 days, 3 events, 3 experiences. Born here, laid here.
Get your tickets now at Crosby St. James, Extra Foods Arima, Sagre Grantee, Grand Bazaar, Endeavour and Chaguanas, Digicel Trend City and C3 Malls, and Digicel Head Office, 11C Maraval, WESN 38 Gattaca Street, Woodbrook, Suntix.com, or call our ticket hotline at 628-5835 or 681-1516.
Welcome back. Well, let's take you to Grenada now, where this story, the recently appointed head of a pre-deal larceny task force and liaison officer, a police officer, Superintendent Solomon Stafford, it is said that he believes the current construct of pre-deal larceny needs to be revisited. He made the comments while visiting farmers in the county of St. Patrick. He said the presence of the officers of the pre-deal larceny task force is instrumental in building trust. We have a story from the Grenada Broadcasting Network, the GBN.
Really, something that we are presently looking at, based on the definition of pre-deal larceny that is presently on the books. We need to relook it, because I think when we deal with pre-deal larceny and pre-deal products, agricultural products, we should more look at farmers and farmers' issues more so than the offenses that might be committed. And I believe that as pre-deal larceny is a good place to extend the program to cover all farming. So meaning whether it is vegetable farming, whether it is poultry, whether it is livestock, whether it is aquaculture, every area of farming.
The Ministry of Agriculture continues to place emphasis on the improvement and sustainability of the livestock sector in Grenada and improved food security. Acting Chief Veterinary and Livestock Officer Dr. Kimon Cummins says the ministry is striving to foster an effective relationship while imparting basic animal husbandry skills. Agriculture Minister Peter David highlighting the importance of the livestock sector.
Sometimes the farmers keep doing the same thing over and over, and they don't have the scientific knowledge. I think what is happening today, as well I've been seeing, is that they are imparting some scientific knowledge to them so that they can have more efficient production methods. And for example, I saw one animal this morning that was injured. They tended to the animal, ensure that the farmer knows what to do so that the animal can be saved. I mean, if you don't tend to them properly, you can have a lovely animal that can bring serious income, but then they die because you just didn't do the right thing. So I want to commend the livestock team for doing that. And what we have to do, and I know they're looking at, is bringing some bigger breeds so that we can get more meat from the goats.
The contingent included Acting Chief Veterinary and Livestock Officer Dr. Keeman Cummins, Veterinary Technologist Yolan Lord Telesford, and Wendell Wilson, Animal Health Assistant Frankie Buckmeyer, and Extension Assistant Raw Lewis.
Just before we go, let me just brief you on what is taking place in today's edition of the News at Tobago. There's this story headline on page 3, Stop This Marina Madness. The Chief Secretary, Mr. Augustine, has distanced the THA from a marina project by the National Infrastructure Development Company, that's NIDCO. It's a company based in Trinidad. Other stories on the front page of the paper, over 40 CPEP workers to lose their jobs, and the Education Division reveals what they say are COVID protocols for schools. And that's what the front page of today's News at Tobago looks like. And that's the back page. Well, that's our broadcast for this morning. We want to thank you for watching. We want to thank our guests. We wonder what's the situation with the Mayor of Point Fortin. We'll find out about that during the course of the day. But we tell you, you can stay in touch with us here at AM Prime. You could check us out at WESNCC on all our social media platforms, and you could send your emails to amprime@wesncc.com. That will do it for us today. But of course, coming up in about half an hour, today's edition of Talking Point with Shah and Small, following the 8 o'clock news. Stay with us here at WESN. I'm Andy Johnson. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.